Boo laws, turn your head away, because in this video, we're going to be going over some, long-term concerning things for Bitcoin. We'll also go over the short-term as well. I am feeling a little bit flippy-floppy from yesterday's short-term time frame analysis, but still, Bitcoin is more or less around the same exact area where it was in yesterday's video. So we'll start it off here with the big chart of the day. And before that, actually, I do want to just have a very, very quick announcement for anyone who doesn't already know. Anyone who's in the quantum wave bands, which is this little strategy right here, a nice little scalping strategy for the hourly and 30-minute time frame for Bitcoin and a few other altcoins as well. We actually did bring up or bring to life the new Discord channel for quantum wave bands. You can claim your Discord access simply by going to the exact same place that you claimed your indicator access. Just link your Discord there, and you can join on in and talk with all of the quantum wave banders. Of course, anyone else can also even claim your trial for 30 days free with the code trial in all capitals. All right, that's enough of that. Let's go on over into the scary chart of the day. So, scary chart of the day. I wanted to do a quick analysis on the very high term timeframes for Bitcoin here, because we've seen a somewhat consistent, or actually a very consistent signal from cycle to cycle that has essentially told you, hey, you shouldn't be betting on new all-time highs, or at least not anytime soon. And that signal is this. In all prior market cycles for Bitcoin, we've seen a fractal of this particular signal on the monthly stochastic oscillator, where you get this first major momentous move into the very deep critical territory, like you see right here on the green vertical bars. That would be this, 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 and this, just for the colorblind people out there, because I do know that there are a few, and they really don't like it when you use colors in your analysis, but it is what it is, man. Anyways, that first signal is not a death signal. That first signal is a sort of warning signal that the market typically or not typically, but it does have another major high in store. When we go back to this first cycle here from 2013, or the first one that we actually have data for, you can see this signal, this first signal happened right here, and I'm measuring from where it crossed down, by the way. And then Bitcoin rallied up to make a massively new all-time high, and then got that secondary cross to the downside. And of course, that one is what led into this massive long-term bear market. Yes, there were bounces along the way. You can see a bull trap right here, as pretty much every cycle has, but that was, well, a trap. Moving on from there, we see the same thing in 2017. We see this first cross to the downside on the June 2017 rally, and Bitcoin made new highs from there. Didn't even really correct from there, to be fair, like the other iterations we will show do, but this one just continued on to new highs, and then you got that secondary cross to the downside below the critical zone, very key components of this, and that happened, again, about a month or two after the actual high, and set in this very long-term downside for the next 275 days. Then we go over to the next cycle, 2021. I think this one looks a lot more similar to, of course, 2013-2014 cycle, and you got the same thing. You get this first cross to the downside here in the critical zone, which did lead to new highs. It wasn't like significantly new highs like the other iterations, but it was new highs. And then you get that next secondary cross to the downside on this red vertical bar here below the critical zone, and that was essentially setting in your bear market for the next 304 days. Yes, again, there was a nice bull trap right here for a pretty decent rally. I think it was like 30 or 40% off of these lows from that initial signal, but it was indeed a bull trap. Same or similar to what we saw actually in 2017, 2018 as well. I forgot to mention this, but yes, indeed, things did bounce next month like decently. It doesn't look like much on this chart because it's a log scale chart, but it was about a 30 to 40% bounce, or sorry, it might have even been like a 50% bounce. I need to know. I need to do some research here. Yeah, it was a 50% bounce, so pretty decent. But again, no continuation of new highs or anything like this. And then, of course, we have a very similar setup on this current iteration here. We see that first cross to the downside in the critical zone. That was actually last year in May, so literally about 1 year ago. And Bitcoin corrected for a while. Yes, just like we saw over here, correction for a while too, and then moved on to massively, like decently new all-time highs. If you're spoiled by cryptocurrency, then of course that's not going to seem that impressive, but it was new all-time highs. And then what do you know? We got the secondary cross to the downside as of March, and also are losing the critical zone here too. And if this sort of interplay is anything to be going off of, well, that would imply that any sort of, upside move we get here is probably going to be a bull trap. Now, I want to highlight some of the similarities between these. Again, the days from the high, from that secondary signal to the next major low is pretty consistent at 300-ish. This one 306, this one 275, this one 304. I'm presuming that this one's going to be around 300 over here as well. And then also I measured the time difference between that first green vertical bar and the red vertical bar. This first one over here, 334 days. Second one here, 245 days. Third one here, 245 days. And well, this one that we saw recently was 304 days. So we can say that all of those are like somewhat consistent with each other. Yes, it's a very limited amount of iterations here, but it has been, more or less consistent over the history of Bitcoin for the past 15 years now, essentially. So this is what does make me, again, concerned for the long term. Look, I'm not saying it's impossible for Bitcoin to go to new all-time highs, but what I am going to say is that as long as the monthly stochastic oscillator is positioned to the downside, I don't think it's wise to be looking for like a major massive rally to new all-time highs, something like this. It's better to be defensive. And in this case, it does make me really consider that, we are in a precarious position, or at least if you're long Bitcoin, it's in a bit of a precarious position. And if history is anything to go off of, which typically it is, people have not made much money by betting against this sort of setup here. Now, moving on from there, I want to get into some short-term timeframes. So it's all gone now. The BULAs can come back, and we can go into some short-term. And we will go into some short term at this exact moment. And I want to go over yesterday's price action analysis. So in yesterday's video, I was saying, hey, Bitcoin has a nice bearish engulfing dildo right here. That was Tuesday's closure, which did close below the low of the prior, or the literal low of the prior, just by a few bucks, but it did indeed. However, yesterday, despite Bitcoin trying a little bit to the downside, we see no follow through. And so that makes me consider that, hey, this is probably a non-signal. It's probably a non-event. Now, if you want to play things by the book, by like the TA, the OG TA book, then yes, Tuesday's high is a pivot. That is $86,000 on spot price action, meaning that as long as Bitcoin's below there, should be anticipating some downside. However, with Bitcoin holding in this region here, and especially closing yesterday, decently, it held the line there. I look at that as a signal that it probably is going to reaccumulate here and try for another upside move. But here's the thing, and here's a very, 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 very simplistic way of looking at this, and it will be the bearish confirmation pivot, which is simply just that last potential higher low that we saw in the early morning session here. Is probably going to be late in the day if you're in the Western Hemisphere, but just this low right here at 83,800. As long as Bitcoin's above there, I would treat this one as probably more likely to try another upside move. And if it can reclaim again that Tuesday high, that would be my confirmation of a failure of a bearish pivot, thus leading towards some decent upside. And I do think the more that I look at it on the back end as well, that's probably more likely. Just the timing of this would make a lot more sense. So let's go over a few reasons why that might be. One, as far as indicators go, we do see that there is hidden bullish divergence of multiple drives here, and well, so far so good. Again, that is why this low over here at 83,800 is so critical, because as long as Bitcoin's above there, that hidden bullish divergence is active and is valid, if you will. And we're also going to be seeing the crown oscillator turn up here as well around a major fib. So that's typically a good sign, at least for some short term. But this is not like higher term time frame stuff. So I don't know how much it's going to matter in the grand scheme of things when we're realistically in just a very tight range. And I don't have a good read on this one, to be honest with you. I'm going to be flippy floppy here, I'm pretty sure. Anyways, 2-day time frame, as we went over in multiple videos, does still have the same multiple drives of regular bullish divergence, 3 drives right here, which is typically rather strong, and generally will get at least a test to that green moving average, which is still a little bit higher than where Bitcoin reached a couple days ago on Tuesday. So if it does hit, then that obviously would imply that Bitcoin is going to reclaim, or very likely going to reclaim, that Tuesday high, and that would be my confirmation for, hey, Bitcoin's going to rally likely into like the low 90s, something like this. Now, on the other side, there is still potential for hidden bearish divergence here if Bitcoin confirms a local high here. So as long as Bitcoin's kind of within this short-term time frame holding pattern between, let's call it 83, about 83,000 and change to the downside versus about 86,000 to the upside, there is potential for that. But moving on from there, we should also acknowledge that the 3-day time frame also has regular bullish divergence. So these are higher time frame readings that definitely supersede lower term time frame issues comparatively at least. And then of course we also have the meta signal setup, which is still valid as well. This one for the daily, I'm not talking about the 4-hour one, which we went over in yesterday's video, which already hit pretty much all of the targets, but this one very specifically for the daily has not hit the first target. And I generally, whenever I see these setups, especially like the better ones, which I would consider this one a better one because it is a one-spot one, but they almost, I shouldn't say almost always, but a little under 70% of the time they will hit target number one. And that is, again, a bit higher than what we saw on Tuesday's high. That's 87,250. Even target number two at $95,000 doesn't seem like super out of reach, considering that is just under 50% probability to be hitting. And that still, keeps Bitcoin in the overall long-term range. So it doesn't really do anything for it. So, I look at this as still compelling that Bitcoin very likely has another try to the upside, just like we saw on these prior signals here. But on all of these signals, that secondary move to the upside was a bull trap. And that has been very consistent and happens in all prior iterations the next month, like within the next 2 months, from that signal. So this one over here took 1, 2, actually 3. This one over here took 1, 2. This one over here took 1, 2. And this one over here, well, a little bit more. Anyways, going back into it, and let's reference this. Yes, I do also want to go over the timing of this because we've spoken at length about the Fibonacci time extension, which you see right here in the green vertical bars. That still projects a date of relevancy around the last week of this month. Whether it's the last week of this month or the first week of May, I don't know, but anywhere around there kind of makes sense for a nice pivot on the market. And what we've seen over the past 3 years now, since November of 2022, is that these projections have lined up really well, typically with local highs, in one case a local low and in one case an actual breakout, but typically these have aligned around the local highs. And if Bitcoin is going to rally up into that date, let's just call it late April, that would be a good place again for at least a local high into a pullback, and maybe even correlates quite well with the timing of a potential bull trap as well. On top of that, when we go over here, supporting the short-term upside, with targets, potentially into the low to mid 90s, this moon setup is still valid as well. This one, by the way, using the skeleton key, which we've gotten a lot of questions about this, by the way. The skeleton key is a part of the Quant Prime service. Maybe we should actually rename it so it becomes a little more obvious, but you can actually try this one out for free as well for 30 days with that same code. I would really not suggest this to beginners. This is certainly for more advanced people, more so because if you don't even know your way around TradingView, you're just going to piss everyone off in the Discord. But I digress. But anyways, the moon setup here, again, we did get the bull moon, if you want to call it that, which did fire off on Sunday. These last for 14 to 15 days, which again puts us at the very end of this month of April. And theoretically, it's more likely, or probabilistically speaking, it's more likely to show some upside. Out of all of the iterations in Bitcoin's past history, about almost 58% of these have been profitable just by opening on the bull moon and closing on the bear moon, if you want to call it that, or at least I'm going to call it that because I don't have a better word for it. And I don't know if it's a full or a new moon, and it doesn't really matter to me as well. But as long as it's consistent, that's what I care about. Anyways, yeah, that would also be supporting, short-term upside. So here's the thing. if I'm going to flip-flop from yesterday, again, I need to see Bitcoin actually officially close above that Tuesday high. That could happen on as low as a 4-hour time frame. And of course, the bearish pivot, like I just said, is going to be that 83,800-ish number, meaning that as long as Bitcoin's above there, I think that the Bullahs got the ball a little bit more in their side of the court for a short-term move to the upside. If Bitcoin does lose it, then I'd still say the same targets as yesterday are still relevant. That would be somewhere between 79 to 81,000 bucks, let's say. So these are pretty tight ranges, all things considered. So I don't know how relevant this is to a lot of people out there. Anyways, so we've gotten all of that. We went over the timing of this as well. We went over why I'm probably going to flippy floppy here, but we also went over why I think, this is good potential for a trap. So I think I'll leave things on that note. Obviously, we'll update on this one as it evolves. And other than that, I want to wish everyone the best. Fuck, I also forgot to show quantum wave bands people. Actually just had a really short scalp right here. Or sorry, not a short scalp, but I mean a short-term scalp. Like the timing that it took for it to play out was quite short. This one opened at about 84, closing at about almost 85. So not even like a humongous trade. But hey, what are you going to ask for when things are this tight and this low volatility right now? So yeah. Anyways, that's where I'm going to end it for today. As always, I want to wish everyone the best. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully tomorrow for a nice little live stream.